Today we're going to get advice from Spirit at the time you viewed this video. My plan is to pull three main cards from this tarot deck and then to clarify them, each one with a card from this tarot deck. And I might also look at the bottom of the deck too. Ooh, there's the first one. That's the Eight of Pentacles. Here's the next one. Eight of Swords in reverse. Ooh, this is interesting already. Two eights, that's noteworthy, right? One more card, please. It's this one right here. King of Swords in reverse. Okay, that's wild because I was just shuffling this deck and the card that came out was the King of Swords in reverse, and I felt like it was, I just felt like it was going to be clarifying something. And then we have the Five of Pentacles underneath the bottom of the deck. When I said I felt like it was going to clarify something, I just felt like it was a powerful card and was going to potentially come out again. So that's sort of wild that it did. Okay, so the main cards, the three main cards are Eight of Pentacles, Eight of Swords in reverse, King of Swords in reverse, Five of Pentacles is at the bottom of the deck. So now I'm going to get some clarifiers, please. Clarifier for the Eight of Pentacles, please. So the deck I'm using to clarify is another tarot deck. So oftentimes I use Oracle to clarify, but today is a little different. It's this one right here. Seven of Cups in reverse, clarifying the Eight of Pentacles. All right. Oh, it's this one. Here they are. Okay, here are the two clarifiers. So the Eight of Swords is clarified by the Hangman. We'll call it the Hanged Person. And the King of Swords in reverse is clarified by Justice. Oh my God, you cannot make this up. Look at that. The bottom of the deck for this clarifying deck is King of Swords in reverse. Wow, that's wild. Okay. I don't know if I like that. I'm going to put them like this, I think, instead, so we can see the imagery everywhere. I'm going to put the King of Swords in the middle because clearly it is an important part of this reading. Okay, so you watched me shuffle this little clarifying deck, and it's not like the King of Swords was just at the bottom and I just flipped it again. Isn't that so crazy? Wow. Okay, so give me a moment with these cards. Okay, wow. What a beautiful reading. I mean, let's start with the King of Swords in reverse. It has shown up 3 times. So in my pre-card or my pre-reading shuffle, and I took note of it. And then here it showed up in the main spread, and then it shows up here as a clarifier. So this seems to be the main message, and and before I get to what it seems to be speaking about in this reading, I'm just like blown away by all the pink in this card playing off these roses. I just think that's wild considering it. I mean, I just think it's another validation that the King of Swords is the main message here. So what is that message? What is coming to me very strongly is sometimes the King of Swords can represent like convention. And so with it being in reverse 3 times, 3 times, what is coming is that I think some sort of unconventional approach to what you are doing is important. Now, let's talk a little bit about, before we move forward with these 3 cards, about this Five of Pentacles at the bottom of the deck, because typically the Five of Pentacles can be thought of as a negative card. However, when it's at the bottom of the deck, in an advice from Spirit reading, it's hard for me to see it as a negative card because the bottom of the deck to me represents like the why of what you're being asked to do. And so in an advice from Spirit reading, when something shows up at the bottom of the deck, I almost always see it as some sort of positive sign, because I don't think I don't think Spirit gives us advice so that we would for a bad reason, for a bad why, so to speak. And in this reading, excuse me, I'm really like struck by the imagery of all the pretty blues. So of course, depending on a reading, a card and the imagery can I can get different information from it. So in a different reading, this imagery might not strike me as positive, but in this reading, I'm really getting this like beautiful, calming, positive sense, which is very interesting considering it's the Five of Pentacles. So what's coming to me with all of this is that one very positive like message, so to speak, from the Five of Pentacles is don't call attention to your weaknesses. Okay, so I think there is, in terms of why you're being asked to put this advice from Spirit into action, it's because you are learning to not call so much attention to your weaknesses. And that calming sense that's coming to me with these colors and shapes in this particular reading with this particular card and imagery is giving me the sense that with that being put into practice, you're going to learn more and more what true inner tranquility and peace really is. So there's something here about thinking that your peace comes from orchestrating something outside of you, but really it's this inner critic that's always calling attention to your weaknesses that is the main problem right now. And so as you put this advice from Spirit into action, you're going to learn to start to befriend that inner critic, help it understand that you you can listen to it, but it's not in charge. Do you know what I'm saying? And from there, baby step by baby step, you're going to calm your nervous system down a little bit and have more inner peace. Now, this is just so interesting because, sorry, just like a few things are coming to me. I'm trying to decide which direction to go. So the bottom of the deck clarifier is the King of Swords in reverse. So your main advice from Spirit is King of Swords in reverse, which is unconventional, an unconventional approach, right? Then why are you being asked to do that? Well, then the bottom of the deck clarifier is King of Swords in reverse. So you're being asked to put an unconventional approach into practice so that you can trust the unconventional approach. So that's what's coming to me with the King of Swords in reverse and the Five of Pentacles at the bottom of the deck. The why of what you're being asked to do is so you can trust the unconventional approach, because there's such beauty to unconventional approaches, isn't there? But when we don't trust it, then our inner critic gets in the way, right? We call attention to our weaknesses, causing a complete disruption in our tranquility. And then unconventional approaches don't seem that great, right? But there's something here about the why and the what being aligned. And essentially, again, the what is put some sort of unconventional approach into action so that more and more you can liberate yourself from this harsh inner critic, and you can begin to trust the beauty of the unconventional approach. Now, remember when I was saying that there's a theme here in this reading that's coming through, and it's like shifting from thinking you're stuck because of some sort of external or not experiencing peace or tranquility because of some sort of external event or circumstance. But this is like a call to looking at the internal world a little more. I bring that up again because I think it's speaking strongly here, that same message in the Eight of Swords in reverse, clarified by the Hanged Person. Because the Eight of Swords can be a really difficult energy. The good news is you have it in reverse here. And so in the standard imagery of the Eight of Swords, you have a person who is bound. There's 8 swords around her. She's like, I think her hands are tied behind her back. She might even be blindfolded. So it's just like really bound energy, right? But what's always said about the Eight of Swords is that although she's bound, the bindings are actually pretty loose, and she could easily unbind herself if she wanted to. So you have the Eight of Swords in reverse, which is telling me that you're liberating some of that bound energy. In terms of advice from Spirit, I think it's one and the same. I think you're in process. You're doing a really great job of liberating some of that bound energy while you're also being asked to continue to do that. And it's clarified by the Hanged Person. And the Hanged Person, important interpretation of this card is perspective shifts, like the power of perspective shifts. And see how in this imagery you can see that person is bound by her foot. And so there's another like idea here of having to unbind ourselves. And so there's definitely a theme in this. Again, not calling attention to your weaknesses, turning your focus from external to your internal world to deal with some unsettled energy. And in whatever area of your life that this might be applying to, being willing to implement some sort of unconventional approach. And as you implement that unconventional approach, what's probably going to happen, because this seems to be how life is here on planet Earth, is even though there's beauty in the unconventional approach, because our culture devalues it, then when we implement the unconventional approach, it usually like pulls up our insecurities to be looked at. And I'm almost like getting that with the King of Swords imagery here. I'm thinking of like the sword and the stone and like pulling that sword out. And then isn't it interesting that here in Justice, the clarifying card for the King of Swords, she's holding a sword. And so it's almost like I'm getting the sense that as you implement unconventional approaches, insecurities rise, right? And maybe that's been happening in the past. And what maybe the advice from Spirit is to know that that's really natural. But then it's what you do about those insecurities that come up that really makes a difference. So in other words, do you listen to the insecurities? Do you call attention to your weaknesses? Or do you process them? Do you find support, the support you need in order to process them, in order to kind of pull that sword out that's harming yourself? Then when we pull it out, we become the embodiment of justice. And the beautiful interpretation of the Justice card is like understanding, the sword represents the sword of choice. So really consciously holding that sword of choice and understanding the nuances of choice and where we're putting things, like the subtleties of choice. So like seeing choice in not only big choices in our life, but also the seemingly small. And so there's like something really, really beautiful here. Again, as you're willing to implement more unconventional approaches, it's going to pull up insecurities. That's natural. That's not your fault. That's just a part of the process. But what you do with that, if you use it to be like, okay, I see the sword, I'm going to pull out the sword, I'm going to stop hurting myself, and I'm going to hold this sort of choice. That's both, I think, the benefit of what you're being asked to do and what you're being asked to do, which is kind of like what this whole reading is sort of giving me, which is what I talked about with like the King of Swords showing up in the advice and in the why you're asking to put that advice into action. It's like that sort of theme is almost showing up. The what and the why are very much intertwined in this reading. So then let's talk about the Eight of Pentacles and the Seven of Cups, because this is really a beautiful combination. So the Eight of Pentacles can represent like putting your consistent, diligent effort behind something that's going to really compound. Do you know what I mean? And so I think in terms of advice from Spirit, I think that is powerful advice, right? So you have this sort of choice. You're seeing more clearly as you stop beating yourself up so much. And you understand more then where to put your efforts. And then those efforts can build and compound as they should. And the Seven of Cups in reverse is a really beautiful message. So Seven of Cups, one quote unquote negative aspect of the card can be that we're in like fantasy thinking. So we kind of can't decide which out of all the options to choose, and we kind of like daydream, right? Instead of taking action. Now, of course, I'm all about the power of daydreaming and the power of thinking big, and there's beauty in fantasy. However, there can also be a shadow side to that, right? If we're not able to ground our dreams into reality, then then we need to look at some of our fantasy thinking. And so there's something here about seeing where, so the Seven of Cups is in reverse. So in terms of advice, I think it's being willing to notice when we're in fantasy thinking versus putting things into reality, into practice, grounding things into reality. I think it also is speaking about the choice options, because the Seven of Cups is like there's too many choices, we don't know what to focus on, which is almost like the exact opposite of the Eight of Pentacles and of Justice. Do you know what I mean? Eight of Pentacles is like you are diligently, consciously putting your tangible efforts behind something that will compound, that will build. You're building some sort of ecosystem out, and you are allowing that ecosystem to become more robust, right? And then the Justice card, as we talked about, is the sword of choice. So she's not sitting confused about where to put her choice energy, right? She is understanding she has choice, she's putting it behind something. And so in terms of advice from Spirit, again, I think it's this idea of grounding things into reality. But there's a paradox here because you're being asked to do it in some sort of unconventional way. So let's take a breath on that, right? Because that's kind of a big deal. Like, you're not being asked to work hard in a conventional sense, right? Because like one beautiful aspect of the Eight of Pentacles, one thing it can be symbolized is hard work, but not hard work in this really like, again, conventional, toxic sense. It's an unconventional approach to grounding something into reality. And then another paradox here is like, as you are taking an unconventional approach to ground something into reality, you're also liberating yourself, which again is what the Eight of Swords in reverse spoke to me about. You're liberating yourself through perspective shifts. So there's a lot going on in these cards, isn't there? So I'm just like really struck by the complexity in a really beautiful way. And what that's telling me is you have there's a robustness to who you are, the character, the type of person that you are, the healing you've already done. You can hold complexities of life, right? You can understand the idea of putting diligent effort behind something in order to ground it into reality. But you can also pick out the nuances of when you might be just trying to be hardworking in a toxic sense, so that you and others don't call attention to your weaknesses, right? So there's just like this beautiful complexity to who you are and where you're at. And I think there's something here about just like feeling into the nuances of things, the paradoxes of things, that is also important, along with this more tangible advice from Spirit. I think there's this idea of realizing that, life is typically a lot more complex than we give ourselves credit for. And there are nuances, and things take some time. And although our fantasies are wonderful, grounding fantasies in reality is different than daydreaming about them, right? And so there's just like some subtle tweaks to how you are engaging with life, or whatever you're coming to this reading for, if it's a relationship, a project, so on and so forth. I feel like there's subtle tweaks that can be made that are going to make a massive difference. And again, at the center of it all is pulling this sword out. And again, in this reading, it just represents like a sword that's stuck, needs to be pulled, that's harming you in some way, right? And it's stuck. And as you pull it out, look at it more clearly, process it, then you don't have to keep calling attention to your weaknesses and disrupting your tranquility. And as you do all that, you just get this beautiful invitation / permission slip to not only trust yourself, but also trust the unconventional path, the wild that, I think I've mentioned this quote a few times on this channel already, but it is such a beautiful one, and I don't know who to credit to off the top of my head, but it's underneath it all, we are wild. and we know it. And maybe it says you. Maybe I'll say it that way because that's a powerful way to interpret it. Underneath it all, you are wild and you know it. And so there's this like rewilding that is happening in your life, and that I think the advice from Spirit is to allow it to happen in your life. The request from Spirit is to keep letting it happen. It's all basically saying the same thing. And realizing that everything you're experiencing, like the insecurities that come up as you rewild, as you go from trusting convention, which is just man-made arbitrary rules, right, to wildness, which is from Mother Nature and Mother God. Inevitably, insecurities arise because in our culture we were not taught to trust that. We were taught to trust convention. But as you deal with those insecurities a bit differently, you're going to have a whole different world open up to you. Tranquility is going to increase. An unbinding is going to happen. You're going to get different insights and perspective shifts. You're going to begin to appreciate and see the value in your perspective shifts. You're going to trust the unconventional path as you give up fantasy for reality, but not in a disempowering sense, in a really empowering sense, where you actually begin to understand how to ground your goals and your dreams into reality so that you can experience them. So I'm just like so thrilled for you. Thank you for letting me do this reading. I'm just struck again by your beautiful complexity. So let's just like end on this, looking at this card if you're able to once again, because I think it represents your beauty, your complexity, what you're being asked to do, the what of what you're being asked to do, and the why. And then of course it's just playing off these roses, which just chings my heart.